Channel 5, KXAS TV.
They've got families that, want them to come home.
And if we can get to that early and stop the inflammation, we can stop destruction of the joint.
The news continues with the night team. Brad Wright, Alice Carone, Scott Murray, and Harold Taft. And now, Channel 5 News Tonight.
Good evening, everyone. One way or another, President Bush says Panama's General Noriega has to go.
Without actually saying it, Channel 5's Larry Esteppa says the White House is implying it will use American troops if that's the only way to force Noriega out.
It's obvious now Noriega is not going to be voted out, not as long as he's in charge of counting the ballots. Former President Jimmy Carter, who was part of an international team invited to watch the election, says Noriega stole it. The returns, he says, are completely fraudulent.
But I hope there will be a worldwide outcry of condemnation against a dictator who has stolen this election from his own people.
The president, like Ronald Reagan before him, has not been able to coerce Noriega to give up power. But the election, he says, should convince the general.
There has been a statement for democracy so loud and so clear that perhaps even General Noriega will listen to it.
Or at least to reason. The U.S. still has the Panama Canal, and with it, an excuse to get involved. There are also 50,000 American troops and their families in the canal zone. Bush and many in Congress have to consider them.
Now we reach the $64 question, what about the military option? And that is, I would not absolutely rule it out under any circumstances.
Whatever we do now has to be credible. And to go into other moves that simply reinforce Noriega by showing our impotence would be a very bad mistake.
Carter, just back from Panama, agrees. He says sending in troops now would turn Noriega into a prophet. That Noriega has said all along the U.S. has been plotting an invasion to retake the canal. For now, the White House is counting on international pressure, economic sanctions, and Noriega's own common sense to solve the stalemate. Larry Esteppa, Channel 5 News Tonight.
Air Force officers and soldiers tried for 2 hours today to overthrow the civilian government in Guatemala. But the coup attempt was stopped when soldiers loyal to the government entered the city in tanks and helicopters. No shots were fired. Several Air Force people were arrested. Retired military officers led today's attempt to overthrow the government.
It isn't official, but Navy investigators believe a fuel leak started a fire on board the USS White Plains today. 6 sailors were killed, 5 others injured. The ship was about 100 miles from Hong Kong in the South China Sea at the time of the accident. Officials don't know if human error or equipment failure caused the blaze. The White Plains tonight is being towed to a naval base in the Philippines.
The wife of a confessed serial killer is in the Wise County Jail tonight, charged with 2 counts of capital murder. Sharon Green turned herself in this afternoon. She was indicted yesterday for the murders of 2 women killed in 1985. Mrs. Green admits witnessing the murders, but claims it was her husband who brutally stabbed the women to death inside a mobile home. Mrs. Green turned in her husband to police 2 weeks ago. Investigators believe Sharon Green participated in the murders and claim to have evidence that will prove their allegations. She's being held in the Wise County Jail on a $1.5 million bond.
Police in Haltom City are used to answering citizens' calls for help as part of their job. But Channel 5's Tim Herrera reports residents in Haltom City are now answering calls for help from the police force.
When Fort Worth police march into the field, they always carry the proper tools of the trade. The necessary firepower and life-saving bulletproof vests are part of the city-issued uniform.
That's the way it is in the big city. But in a smaller place like here in Haltom City, it's a different world. In Haltom City, the money isn't always there to buy the police officers the supplies they need.
Bulletproof vests are not part of the uniform issued in Haltom City. The city doesn't have the money to buy vests.
It's like you take whatever resources you have available and use them in such a way that you're able to achieve the same ends.
But the only way Haltom City can properly outfit police is through the Save a Life Fund. The group is raising $3,400 for 8 new bulletproof vests.
This comes out of their pockets if they have to buy them, and this helps them out.
Citizens also bought police riot gear and gun racks in some patrol cars. They say they do it because they care.
There are people out there that do care about them, you know, their safety. They've got families that, you know, want them to come home.
Fundraisers say they will continue buying life-saving equipment for their police as long as the need is there and the city money isn't. Tim Herrera, Channel 5 News Tonight in Haltom City.
Last night we told you how a man named Joe Testa became president of the local Vietnam Veterans of America by convincing the group he fought in Vietnam. Testa later told us he never served in Vietnam and that he went AWOL twice from boot camp. All the talk of imposters has angered several local veterans groups. Channel 5's Larry Mullen says they're on the lookout now for phony Vietnam veterans whose stories have gone AWOL.
This Denver News article is about a former Army nurse who recalls the bloodshed she saw during her years in Vietnam. But Army records reveal the only blood she saw was for 7 months as a dental assistant at a boot camp here in Texas. And then there's Jesse Wayne Duckworth, who introduced himself to me last fall as a Green Beret who served in Vietnam. He's been seen at many Vietnam veterans functions, but today he told me, quote, I just hung around those guys to help them out at fundraisers. His military record reveals he actually served in Germany and went AWOL once.
Why people feel like they have to up one another or say that there's something that they're really not, I don't understand.
Steve Nail at the Vietnam Veterans Resource Center and other groups are on the lookout for so-called Vietnam wannabes. This is military form SF-180, which must be filled out in order to obtain a copy of a veteran's military records.
If a guy is for real, he won't resent asking for his DD-214. If he's not for real, he may resent it because he may have something to hide.
But Steve, who's to say that a guy can't take this and use a little whiteout and put anything on it that he wants?
You know, you're right, and obviously there have been some recent cases of that. You know, the veteran community as a whole really doesn't care what you did in the military, as long as your heart's right.
As an added assurance, anyone applying for an office, benefits, or even volunteer work as a Vietnam veteran will have to have his military record sent straight to the front office. No more hand-delivered records.
That way the vet doesn't have a chance to get a hold of it, and if he's playing games with me or something like that, he doesn't have a chance to change anything on it.
Larry Mullins, Channel 5 News Tonight.
It's a disease that affects millions of Americans. It can be devastating.
But rheumatoid arthritis doesn't have to be a crippler.
And if we can get to that early and stop the inflammation, we can stop destruction of the joint. Once the cartilage is destroyed, it can't be repaired.
Also help from the FDA in the form of a new drug. Details in just a moment.
The mood is gotten the moment you're on. Abandon yourself to the feel. So comfortable, easy and calm. Embrace the feeling. Take comfort in cotton. Find the True Performance label on Danskin Natural Stretch Activewear.
Many times on these big Texas ranches, I heard about the husband dying and his wife didn't have any idea of how to handle the money. I wanted to be sure that my girl knew all about the money situation. I heard about One Plus and it sounded all right. They give you a complete statement, checking, saving, CDs, and IRAs. My wife knows as much about it now as I do.
Sons and daughters, I'm telling you this only because it's for your own good. Go to Walmart for your Mother's Day gifts. They have everything, from time-saving appliances like microwaves to time-honored gifts like chocolate. But even after you give her these lovely things, she'll still want to hear the words a mother waits all her life to hear. Mom, we're sending you on a cruise.
Walmart, always the low price on the brands you trust, always.
House Speaker Jim Wright went on the offensive today, accusing the Ethics Committee's special counsel, Richard Phelan, of distorting testimony to implicate him of wrongdoing. And he charged the committee had permitted itself to be misled by Phelan's selective use of evidence. Wright's new legal defense team has also filed motions they feel will eliminate many of the 69 formal counts of alleged rules violations. But observers say more than likely it'll only delay the Speaker's hearing before the ethics panel, probably until June.
More than 140 units of blood sent out by the Wadley Blood Center may have been contaminated with a virus, and that virus has been linked to a rare form of cancer. It's called HTLV1, and it can cause adult T-cell leukemia or a nervous disorder. According to Wadley, a recent medical discovery has enabled them to test for the virus. They'll also be able to identify the donors who may have it, then trace all the previous use of that blood over the last decade. Fortunately, carriers rarely contract the illness. Wadley officials say the new screening test will probably be used nationwide.
Millions of adults suffer from rheumatoid arthritis. There's no cure, but there is help. Help that could ease the pain of this crippling disease. And tonight, Channel 5's Marion Connor has the story.
Sandra Vivian feels lucky that she can work, even though she works in pain every day. She's been battling the crippling effects of rheumatoid arthritis for 25 years.
It hurts right here because it's kind of like stretching. It's stretching it, yeah, and I can't make fists or anything like that.
Sandra had the disease for 5 years before she saw a doctor. Experts say that if you have any kind of persistent joint ache, accompanied with stiffness and maybe a low-grade fever, you should see your doctor. Early diagnosis can be crucial.
And if we can get to that early and stop the inflammation, we can stop destruction of the joint. Once the cartilage is destroyed, it can't be repaired.
Dr. Markinson says that a far too prevalent misconception is that nothing medically can be done for arthritis. So many sufferers, instead of looking for professional help, turn to folk remedies instead. They pick up a copper bracelet or take cod liver oil to oil their joints. On the average, they do that kind of thing for up to 4 years. In the meantime, irreparable damage can be done. Tom Hackelman has had rheumatoid arthritis for 7 years. He says that early detection and early treatment slowed down his disease.
And there are medications that are available. And if I had not had the availability of those medications, I probably would be in a wheelchair.
The FDA just released a new drug in January called Rheumatrix, which experts say is very effective in stopping the progression of the disease. The Arthritis Foundation has just released an 800 number for anyone to call who has questions about this devastating but controllable disease. Marion Connor, Channel 5 News Tonight.
By the way, if you have questions, the toll-free number at the Arthritis Foundation is 1-800-283-7800. That's 1-800-283-7800.
Next in sports, Rick Leach reappeared in a Rangers uniform tonight to watch his teammates go for 2 in a row.
And another basketball player will be leaving college early to go for the paychecks of the pros.
And I got my mom to go along with it after promising to come back and graduate.
Scott and sports are up next.
The days of the unreachables are over. Metro Media Paging announces the Reachable System. Call 1-800-437-BEEP and join the Reachables.
Now save 25 to 39% on quality Goodyear radios. A special factory purchase means Goodyear retailers will sell thousands of Goodyear's best radios at savings from $69 to $265 on these tires. All-season radios for passenger cars, radios for imports, light trucks and vans, and performance cars. All sizes are on sale from 25 to 39% off. Sale ends May 13th. Check your newspaper for the participating Goodyear retailer nearest you.
Flying to Houston on business?
If you got the money, I've got the time. 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 I've got the time.
With 37 flights a day to Houston, Hobby, and intercontinental airports, flying Southwest Airlines is like having your own company plane.
Coming up next on The Tonight Show starring Johnny Carson, David Brinkley reviews Ronald Reagan's movie party.
President and Mrs. Reagan sat in the front row, and when it was over, he stood up and said, "We tried to get bedtime for Bonzo, but it was booked."
And Chuck Berry rocked. Coming up next,